Hello, everybody. This is Jimmy. You're reading with Jimmy. We're reading William Shakespeare's Hamlet. We're on Act 1, Scene 4. One more act to go one more scene to go in Act 1, and then we'll be able to summarize that. Hope you're still with me because it's going to get exciting. We left off in Scene 3 where Polonius was giving his son and daughter advice. Hamlet came up in that advice. And both Laertes and his father warn Ophelia about Hamlet. Stay away, they said. The scene before this, Scene 2, we saw Hamlet find out about the ghost and is ready now to join his friends to see if they can see this ghost, who is supposedly his father. So this is Scene 4. It's the platform before the castle where this ghost appears. And we have three characters, Hamlet, Horatio, and Marcellus. One of the things I wanted to mention is that I'm getting some emails, of course, on word pronunciation and things like that. And so sometimes I'll mispronounce intentionally, sometimes unintentionally. I want you to know something about what was going on in Shakespeare's time, and that most of these people, if you remember, they really couldn't read, things like that. So but they knew these stories. They knew these stories. Word of mouth was a big thing in these days because they couldn't read, so they would talk to each other and they would recite. That's actually what Homer did as word of mouth when he did the Iliad and the Odyssey, because that was even almost before writing. In any case, the audience was very familiar with what this story was about already when they were acting it out. So they already knew the ending. I gave you a foreshadowing of the ending way back in Scene 1. I can tell you the whole story, but that would be giving it away because we're reading Shakespeare as if we never read it before, and that's why we're going a little slower and analyzing it while we do it. But if you knew the story and if you heard the story over and over and over again, what these actors were doing were just playing to the crowd. It would be it's like watching a movie again and again and again. You know the movie, you've seen it before, but every now and then you'd see something else. And that's what this audience would do with these plays. So let's begin Scene 4. Hamlet says, "The air bites shrewdly. It's very cold." Horatio replies, "It's a nipping and an eager air." "What hour now?" asks Hamlet. "I think it lacks 12. Horatio says, No, it struck. Means he's saying it's already past 12. Horatio, "Indeed, I heard it not. Then it draws near the season wherein the spirit held his wont to walk." So it's coming time for that ghost to come. Flourish of trumpets. 2 pieces go off. 2 pieces. What does that mean? 2, boom, right? Some flourishing going on, some trumpets going on, some cannon going on. Horatio asks, "What does this mean, my lord?" Hamlet, "The king doth wake tonight and takes his rouse, keeps wassail, and the swaggering upswing reels. And as he drains his draughts of Rhenish down, the kettle drum and trumpet thus bray out the triumph of his pledge." So wassail is a spiced ale, so there's some drinking going on. And Rhenish is a type of wine from the Rhine for religious, and the religious joining it, joining it. So there's some wine and ale being drunk and some flourishing. The triumph of his pledge. What pledge is that? Well, he's the newly coronated king. Remember? Horatio, "Is it a custom?" Hamlet, "Aye, marry, is it? But to my mind, though I am native here, and to the manner born, it is a custom more honored in the breach than the observance. This heavy-headed revel, east and west, makes us traduced and taxed of other nations. They clept us drunkards. And with swinish phrase soil our addition, and indeed it takes, before we continue, Hamlet's really not happy about this type of celebration because they get the reputation. Remember where they're at, right? Denmark. They get the reputation of being drunkards, right? So he says, soil our addition and indeed it takes, let's go on. I'll leave the notes up here for a second in case you want to pause it. From our achievements, though performed at height, the pith and marrow of our attribute so oft it chances in particular men, that for some vicious mole of nature in them, as in their birth, wherein they are not guilty, since nature cannot choose his origin, by the overgrowth of some complexion, oft breaking down the pales and forts of reasons, or by some habit that too much overleavens the form of pulsive manners, that these men, carrying, I say, the stamp of one defect, being nature's livery, or fortune's star, their virtues else, be they as pure as grace, as infinite as man may undergo, shall in the general censor take corruption from the particular fault. The dram of ale doth all the noble substance of a doubt to his own scandal. The dram is a small drink. So he's really criticizing drinking. Does no good, right? Well, some people say it does, but it doesn't. And he explains being a drunkard here pretty well. It's a vicious mole of nature that's in them in their birth, or it's just in their nature because you can't choose your own origin. Maybe that's just part of their nature. And as he finishes saying this, here comes the ghost. Horatio says, "Look, my lord, it comes. Angels and ministers of grace defend us." So don't forget, this is the first time Hamlet saw the ghost. He continues, Hamlet, "Be thou a spirit of health or goblin damned, bring with thee airs from heaven or blasts from hell, be thy intents wicked or charitable, thou comest in such a questionable shape that I will speak to thee. I'll call thee Hamlet, king, father, royal Dane. Answer me, oh, answer me. Let me not burst in ignorance, but tell me why canonized bones, hearsed in death, have burst these crements, why the sepulchre where we saw thee quietly inurned hath opened his ponderous and marble jaws, opened, to cast thee up again. What's going on? What made this mean that thou, dead corpse, again in complete steel revisits thus the glimpse of the moon, making night hideous, and we foolish of nature so horridly to shake our disposition with thoughts beyond the reaches of our souls? Say, why is this? Wherefore? What should we do? So he's talking to the ghost. Cerements are wax cloth for wrapping a corpse. So he's saying you broke you're out of the grave, you burst your grave. It's like Christ rising, right? Christ risen from the grave. You're coming out here. What are you doing? You're making the night hideous. The night is already scary for these people, right? 400 years ago. And you're making the night hideous. What do you want from us? The ghost beckons Hamlet. Doesn't speak, but he beckons. What is a beckon? It's calling to him, perhaps with his arm, maybe with his head. I don't think so. Sometimes you beckon with your head, but he's beckoning him. Horatio says, it beckons you to go away with it, as if some impartment did desire to you alone, as if he wants to talk to you alone. Marcellus says, look, with what courteous action it waves you to a more removed ground. It's actually being very courteous and saying, come, right? He's beckoning. But do not go with it, says Marcellus. No, by no means, says Horatio. Hamlet, it will not speak, then I will follow it. Do not, my lord. So his friends are saying, don't be stupid, right? Hamlet says, what? What should be the fear? I do not set my life in a pin's fee. And for my soul, what can it do, that being a thing immortal as itself? It waves me forth again, I will follow it. Horatio. But what if it tempt you toward the flood, my lord, or the dreadful summit of the cliff? So he wants to go. His friends are saying, don't go. I'll leave these notes up for a minute. One of the footnotes for 158, if you go back and look for 158, it's right here, that cerements, that wax cloth I did a note for. He's saying it's a dissyllable. A dissyllable is a word or metric foot consisting of two syllables. This is an academic. You don't need to know that in order to understand not only what's going on, but to appreciate this. If you were in a situation like this and you saw a ghost and the ghost is beckoning you and your buddies, your friends, and they're saying, don't go, what would you do? Right? So Horatio says, what if it brings you to the cliff? The beetles over his base into the sea, and there assume some horrible form which might deprive your sovereignty of reason. If you follow him, you might go crazy and draw you into madness. Think of it. The very place puts toys of desperation without more motive into every brain that looks so many phantoms to the sea, and here it roar beneath. If you start looking at the sea and hitting the cliffs and the waves, you can go crazy. What if he does this? It waves me still, says Hamlet. Go on. He's talking now to the ghost. I'll follow thee. Marcellus, you shall not go, my lord. Hold off your hands, Hamlet said. In other words, they're trying to stop him by physically restraining him. Hold off your hands. Horatio says, be ruled. You shall not go. Be ruled. No. And he grabs him. You shall not go. Hamlet says, my fate cries out and makes each petty artery in this body as hardy as Numian lion's nerve. The ghost beckons again. Still am I called. Unhand me, gentlemen. Breaking from them. This is an important scene. They're trying to stop him. They all see the ghost. So this is not in Hamlet's head. You're going to read later on as we talk about this. If you go online, some people are going to try to argue and tell you that Hamlet's crazy. He's not crazy. He's not crazy because these people see what he sees too. You're crazy if you're the one that sees things and no one else sees them, right? That's when you can start talking about being crazy. But he sees them. Now, what's the Numian lion? The Numian lion is a monster in Greek mythology that lives at Nema. Eventually, it was killed by Hercules because its golden fur was impervious to attack. It could not be killed with mortal weapons. Its claws were sharper than mortal swords and could cut through strong. This is a strong lion. And actually, when Hercules killed it, he wore that lion's skin and became impervious to weapons. That was one of Hercules's, if you read Greek mythology. So Hamlet is saying, right, and makes me petty. Every party, my fate cries out and makes each petty artery. Notice he uses the word artery. They already knew about that because in the Renaissance, they started cutting bodies up. As hardy as the Numan's lion, so nerve. So he's hardy as that lion. I'm hardy. So unhand me. So the question I want to ask you is, why doesn't the editor's notes talk about this lion? Because it doesn't. As we go down here, you'll see. I'll just give you time to look at it. There's no reference to the lion. Now, why is that? Well, as I told you when we began this scene, these people knew these stories. They knew Greek mythology. They knew Roman mythology. They heard these stories over and over and over again, probably from the time they were children. And I remember Greek mythology. Edith Hamilton's edition of Greek mythology was one of my favorite books when Jimmy was young. And you should really read Greek mythology if you're going to understand the classics, because there's a lot of allusions here. This is called an allusion. It's an allusion. It's a reference to something in the past, something elsewhere, to bring richness to the dialogue. Now, what does that mean? Well, if you took that out of that sentence, as hardy as a lion, it just loses something. You see what I'm saying? As a matter of fact, one of the people I've been talking to, a good friend, told about studying art. When you look at a piece of art, you see what you write down whatever you can write down, size, colors, etc. And then you ask what would be different if you took one of those things out to appreciate art. And then why the artist made choices. We're not going to talk about that third thing, why Shakespeare made his choices yet, because we don't want to go there. Remember, we want to read the story in the story. But the first two, see what you can see in this language and then take one thing out. If I took the Nemean lion out of that sentence, the word Nemean, it would change it completely. It would screw it up. It would take the richness of the language out. You see what I'm saying? So he says, unhand me and exit the ghost in Hamlet. The ghost and the Hamlet go away. And they leave these two guys. Horatio, it waxes desperate with imagination. Let's follow it. It's not fit us to obey. We can't obey Hamlet. We've got to follow him. Horatio, have after. To what issue will this scene come? Marcellus, something is rotten in the state of Denmark. Heaven will direct it. No, let's follow him. So they follow Hamlet. Something's rotten in the state of Denmark. You see these little 3 exclamation points? If you've never heard that said in your life, something's rotten in the state of Denmark, you're leading a sheltered life. If you have heard it, well, let me qualify that. If you've never heard it, you may be leading a sheltered life, or they don't teach it anymore. But if you have heard it, you've heard it in reference when something doesn't meet the smell. You've heard that. This doesn't meet the smell test. Something's rotten in Denmark. If you smell something going wrong or something really bad, if you sense something's really bad, something's rotten in Denmark. That's what that means. So Hamlet follows the ghost and his friends follow him. Scene 5. We're going to continue that later on. You're reading with Jimmy. This is Jimmy. Learn more by watching the entire analysis. I'm really excited to bring Shakespeare to you. I'm very excited now that I got into a rhythm. You feel my rhythm? I do. Jimmy at readingwithjimmy.com. Jimmy at readingwithjimmy.com. Send me an email. Thanks so much for listening. See you for the final scene where Hamlet talks to the ghost. Aha.